Imagine you're on vacation, a quiet escape, a charming little Airbnb tucked away from the noise of the world. You step into the bathroom after a long day of travel, ready to wash your face and unwind from the road. You glance up at the mirror, expecting to see your own tired eyes staring back at you. But you see nothing, not your face, not your shirt, nothing. The room behind you is perfectly reflected. The towels, the shower curtain, the door. But where you should be, there is only an empty space, a void. It's as if you've been completely erased from existence, a ghost in your own life. This is not a scene from a horror movie. This is what happened to a young traveler named Alex Miller. It started with a simple, unsettling observation, a glitch in reality that couldn't be explained away. At first, Alex thought it was just a trick of the light, perhaps a strange distortion in the old glass. He moved left, he moved right. The reflection of the room moved with him, perfectly normal. But the space where his own image should have been remained stubbornly, impossibly empty. It was a chilling puzzle that had no logical solution, a silent, terrifying question mark hanging in the air. The initial confusion quickly gave way to a creeping dread, a cold feeling that settled deep in the pit of his stomach. How could a mirror show everything in the room except for the person standing directly in front of it? He tried waving his hand, hoping to see some flicker of movement, some sign that he was still there. The mirror showed only the wall behind him. The stillness was absolute. The silence in the small bathroom suddenly felt heavy, oppressive. It was in that moment that the relaxing getaway Alex had planned began to transform into something else entirely. Something dark, something sinister. This story begins with a simple object, an ordinary bathroom mirror, the kind you might find in any home, in any rental, anywhere in the world. But this mirror was different. It held a secret. A dark capability that defied all reason and logic. It didn't just reflect light, it reflected a terrifying absence. And for Alex Miller, what started as a strange curiosity would soon spiral into a waking nightmare. He was about to discover that sometimes, the most terrifying thing you can see in a mirror is not a monster, but the horrifying realization that you are not there at all. Alex Miller was just looking for a break. A 28-year-old graphic designer from the city, he felt the burnout creeping in after months of long hours and high-pressure projects. He craved solitude and quiet. He wanted to disconnect from the digital world and reconnect with himself. The listing on Airbnb seemed like a dream come true, a cozy, rustic cabin nestled deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town. The photos showed a stone fireplace, a comfortable-looking bed, and a promise of peaceful seclusion. It was exactly what he needed, the perfect antidote to his hectic urban life. He booked it for a long weekend without a second thought. The drive itself was part of the appeal. Winding country roads took him further and further from the concrete jungle, the scenery shifting from skyscrapers to rolling hills, and finally to dense, ancient forests. When he arrived, the cabin was even better than the pictures. It was charming, isolated, and filled with a sense of history. The air was crisp and clean, smelling of pine and damp earth. As he unpacked his bags and settled in, a feeling of relief washed over him. This was it. This was the peace he had been searching for. He felt the stress of his daily life begin to melt away with every passing minute. The first few hours were idyllic. Alex explored the small cabin, admiring the handcrafted wooden furniture and the quaint, old-fashioned decor. He made a cup of tea and sat on the porch, listening to the sound of birdsong and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Everything was perfect. There were no sirens, no traffic, no demanding clients, just the quiet hum of nature. As evening began to fall, casting long shadows through the trees, he decided to freshen up before starting a fire. He grabbed his toiletries and headed for the small, unassuming bathroom, completely unaware that his perfect retreat was about to be shattered. He was not looking for trouble. He was not a paranormal investigator or a thrill seeker. Alex was an ordinary person seeking an ordinary vacation. He had no reason to suspect that anything was amiss. The cabin felt safe. It felt welcoming. There were no warning signs, no strange noises, no ominous feelings to suggest the horror that was waiting for him. He stepped in front of the bathroom sink, turned on the tap, and looked up. That was the moment everything changed. The moment his peaceful getaway ended and a terrifying ordeal began, all because of the simple antique mirror hanging on the wall. The water ran cold. Alex Miller leaned forward. It was the end of his first day. His eyes met the mirror, or rather, the space where his reflection should have been. It was a blank, but he wasn't. A human-shaped hole in reality. A cold knot began to form in his stomach. The initial confusion began to curdle into a genuine primal fear. He was standing right there, solid and real, yet the mirror insisted he was not. He took a shaky step back. He was alone, miles from anyone, in a cabin with a mirror that had forgotten him. There had to be a logical explanation. Alex's mind raced, searching for a rational explanation. He was a practical person, not someone who believed in ghosts. Maybe it was a screen disguised as a mirror, playing a looped video. He approached the mirror again, running his fingers over the cold, smooth glass. It was just a mirror. He flicked the light switch. The reflection changed, but the empty space remained. He pointed his phone at the mirror. On his phone screen he could see the phone, but in the mirror's reflection, there was only the phone, floating eerily. The cabin now seemed menacing. It was real. The fear was a full-blown panic. He was trapped, and the mirror insisted he wasn't there. Alex knew he had to be systematic. Panic would get him nowhere. He needed evidence to prove what was happening. He started simple tests to document the mirror's bizarre properties. He held a red towel up to the mirror. He saw the towel, but not himself. Next, he placed his watch on the sink. It appeared in the reflection. When he picked it up, the watch vanished from the mirror. He wrote "hello" on a paper and held it up. The paper appeared, but his hand was gone. The tests were conclusive. He was in a room with a mirror that had erased him. Why? Was he safe? As darkness fell, the charming retreat became a cage. Alex couldn't bring himself to use the bathroom again. The knowledge of the mirror sat in his mind like a stone. Every creak sounded like a footstep. The silence felt like a suffocating blanket. He built a fire, the flames casting a warm light. He turned on the television, hoping the noise would drown out his thoughts. But his gaze kept drifting back towards the hallway, the closed bathroom door. Sleep was out of the question. He thought about leaving, but a part of him was paralyzed by morbid curiosity. He was caught in a terrible limbo. Hours passed. The fire died down. Alex sat in the near darkness, his mind replaying the events. He felt a compulsion growing within him, a need to look again. With a deep breath he stood up and began the slow walk back down the hallway. He had to know. Alex stood before the bathroom door, driven by terror and an irresistible need to know more. He pushed it open, the hinges creaking. He flicked on the light and stepped inside, eyes fixed on the mirror. The void was still there, a denial of his existence. But then, something new, a flicker, a heat haze. A shape began to coalesce, a ghostly outline slowly gaining substance. The silhouette of a person was starting to appear. It was his reflection, finally appearing. But it wasn't quite right. Something was deeply wrong with the man staring back at him. The figure in the mirror was him, but older. The face in the glass was etched with lines Alex didn't have, threads of gray stark against the familiar dark brown hair. It was like looking at a photograph of himself from 20 years in the future. Beyond the age, the man in the mirror was dressed in a dark button-down shirt, the kind Alex didn't even own. This wasn't just a reflection, it was a separate entity borrowing his face. Alex stood perfectly still, but the reflection moved, studying him with a pained, knowing look. The basic rule of a reflection, that it mimics your every move, was broken. This entity had its own agency, contained within the silvered prison of the glass. He was looking at himself, but it felt like he was looking at a complete stranger. The silence in the bathroom was thick and heavy, broken only by the sound of Alex's own ragged breathing. He and the man in the mirror stood locked in a strange, impossible standoff. Alex, the young man in the present, and his reflection, the older, grizzled version from some unknown future. The reflection's expression was one of deep, soul-crushing sorrow. Its eyes, which were his eyes but not his eyes, seemed to plead with him. Then its mouth began to move. Slowly, deliberately, the reflection's lips formed words. But there was no sound, not a whisper, not a breath. Just the silent, chilling motion of a message being delivered from a place beyond his hearing. Alex stared, mesmerized and horrified, trying to read the lips of his own future ghost. The words were indistinct at first, mouthed with a painful slowness. Get out. It was unmistakable, a two-word command, a desperate plea from the silent man in the glass. The reflection's eyes were wide with what looked like terror, not for itself, but for him. It was a warning, a clear and direct message sent across an impossible divide. The man in the mirror was trying to save him from a fate it had already suffered. The implication was terrifying. Staying here in this cabin would lead him to become this broken, older man. A cold dread, more profound than anything he had felt before, seized him. This was no longer a passive phenomenon, it was an active communication. The mirror wasn't just a glitch in reality, it was a conduit, a window into a future he was now desperate to avoid. He took an involuntary step backward, his body reacting before his mind could even process the command. The reflection's eyes followed him, its desperate expression never wavering. It mouthed the words again, more urgently this time. "Get out, now!" The silent shout echoed in the chambers of his mind, louder than any real sound could be. He felt a powerful urge to obey, to turn and run and not stop until the sun came up, but he was frozen, rooted to the spot by a morbid fascination. Who was this man? What had happened to him? What was this terrible future he was being warned about? The questions swirled in his head, a vortex of fear and confusion. The reflection seemed to understand his hesitation. Its expression shifted from desperation to one of pure, unadulterated horror. As Alex watched, a thin, dark line of red began to well up in the reflection's left nostril. A single drop of blood was beginning to form. The drop of blood was a horrifying new detail, a visceral punctuation mark on the silent warning. It grew, trembled at the edge of the reflection's nostril, and then traced a slow, crimson path down its upper lip. Alex watched, his stomach churning. He touched his own face, his fingers probing the skin beneath his nose. It was dry, there was no blood, no injury. The violence was confined to the world behind the glass, a gruesome spectacle being performed just for him. The man in the mirror didn't seem to notice the blood, his gaze still locked on Alex, his expression one of escalating panic. Then, more signs of injury began to appear on the reflected image, blooming on its skin like macabre flowers. A dark, ugly bruise started to blossom on its cheekbone, deepening from a faint shadow to a violent shade of purple and blue. A long, shallow cut materialized on its forehead, just above the eyebrow, welling with more fresh, dark blood that began to snake down its temple. The handsome, older face was rapidly transforming into a mask of pain and trauma. It was like watching a time-lapse video of a brutal assault, with each new injury appearing suddenly and without cause. Alex could feel the bile rising in his throat. This was too much. This was a vision of pure horror, a portrait of his own future decay being painted in real time. The reflection's mouth was still moving, but the words were lost in the chaos of its own destruction. The silent pleas had become frantic, the movements of its lips fast and desperate. It was as if the man in the mirror was being attacked by an unseen assailant, and Alex was being forced to watch, helpless, from the other side. The pristine formal shirt the reflection wore was now being stained, drops of blood spattering across the collar. The sense of being a spectator vanished, replaced by a suffocating feeling of complicity. He was watching his own demise. The mirror wasn't just showing him a possible future, it felt like it was creating it, cementing it into reality with every new wound that appeared. The warning to get out now felt less like advice and more like a final desperate cry before being consumed by whatever horror haunted this place. The reflection's eyes, now wide with agony, pleaded with him one last time before its entire body began to glitch, to flicker violently, as if the connection between their worlds was becoming unstable. The image in the mirror convulsed, Alex's battered double flickered, injuries deepening grotesquely. Blood poured from the reflection's wounds, staining the glass as his eyes rolled back, body slumping forward. Suddenly, bloody hands slammed against the inside of the mirror, leaving thick, red streaks. Alex stumbled back, heart pounding, unable to look away from the carnage inches from his own face. The reflection slid down the glass, silent screams echoing in Alex's mind. Breaking free from his paralysis, Alex bolted from the bathroom, slamming the door behind him. He leaned against it, trembling, the image of his own ruined face burned into his memory. Desperate for proof, he fumbled for his phone, hands shaking as he opened the camera. He knew he had to go back, someone else had to see this. With a surge of fear-fueled resolve, Alex hit record. He forced himself to return, determined to capture the bleeding man in the mirror. Sometimes, the only way out is through. Fear drove Alex back to the bathroom, phone recording, every step documented. He pushed the door open, camera first, using the screen as a shield. The light was harsh, the mirror unchanged. His bloodied double still slumped against the glass, handprints smeared red. Alex filmed every detail, the wounds, the flickering, the silent agony. The reflection glitched, mouth frozen in a scream. Alex's hands shook, but he kept filming, determined to gather evidence. He was no longer just a victim, he was a witness. Sometimes proof is the only thing that keeps you sane. He stepped back, heart racing, video still rolling. The horror was real, and now, it was recorded. The red light stayed on. Alex backed out, slamming the door, breath ragged as he saved the video. Proof, undeniable, horrifying, was on his phone. Panic surged. Who could he call? The police? No, they'd never believe him. He found the Airbnb owner's number and dialed, hands slick with sweat. The phone rang, slicing through the silence. On the fourth ring, a groggy voice answered. Hello? Mark, this is Alex Miller. I'm at your cabin. Something's wrong with the bathroom mirror. Silence. Then Mark's tone shifted. No confusion, just resignation. The reflection, Mark whispered. It showed you, didn't it? The bleeding man. Alex's blood ran cold. The owner knew. He wasn't the first. Some horrors are shared, and some are passed on. Mark's confession spilled out. He'd inherited the cabin, the mirror always there. Complaints started years ago, guests feeling watched, seeing things in the glass. The stories grew, missing reflections, older versions of themselves, silent warnings, then blood. Mark admitted he'd never looked directly, too afraid of what he might see. He'd tried to remove the mirror, but it was impossibly heavy, built into the wall. Breaking it felt like tempting fate. He'd let fear and superstition keep the secret. I should have warned you, Mark said, voice heavy with guilt. Alex's anger simmered. He'd been led into a trap. Some secrets are too heavy to carry alone. Mark had lived with the fear. Now, so would Alex. Mark revealed others had suffered. Honeymooners, hikers, each haunted by their own reflection. The mirror showed personal horrors, feeding on fear, growing stronger with every victim. A local historian told tales of the original owner dying in that very bathroom, staring into the mirror as he bled out. Mark mentioned a police report from the last guest, David Chen, who called the authorities after his own encounter. The police came, took statements, and photos. The case was real, documented. Alex felt a chill. This was more than a ghost story. What did the police do? Alex asked. Mark's answer was grim. They took a statement, and they took pictures. The mirror's legacy was written in fear, and now, in official records. Alex realized he was part of a chain. The danger was real, and it had a history. Some stories refused to die. Mark explained. David Chen, a journalist, had documented everything. Notes, photos, video. The police sent a deputy who saw nothing unusual in the mirror himself. The mirror only performed for its chosen victim. The deputy filed an unexplained occurrence report, unsettled by Chen's evidence. Official photos showed Chen in front of the mirror, his reflection missing, a void where his image should be. The case remained open, unexplained, a haunting on record. Mark offered to send Alex the file. Maybe it'll help, he said, but hope was thin. The police couldn't arrest a mirror. Alex was now part of a documented haunting. Validated but more terrified than ever. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. As the call ended, Alex felt a weird sense of clarity, even though the fear was still there. He looked at the video file he'd recorded and pressed play. The shaky footage filled the screen. There it was, the blood-streaked mirror, those gruesome handprints, and the face of his future self. But as he watched, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. In the final seconds, the image distorted. And right in the middle of all that digital static, for just a split second, the face changed. It wasn't his older self anymore. The features had morphed into a completely different person. It was a man Alex didn't recognize, his face twisted in agony. A digital ghost, another soul trapped in the mirror's cycle. The mirror wasn't just showing its victims their own future, it was collecting them. A momentary slip that revealed the presence of others trapped within the glass. The mirror didn't just want to scare him, it wanted to keep him. He had captured a digital ghost and he had to get this footage out. Dawn broke, but brought no comfort to Alex. He had to get out. Pack, car, drive, no looking back. He moved frantically, throwing clothes into his bag. Every sound made him jump. The cabin felt like a predator's den. Zipping his bag, a chilling thought. What if leaving wasn't enough? The mirror had shown him a bruised future. Was his fate sealed? Despite the dread, he had to try. He grabbed his keys and took one last look around. Heart pounding, he opened the door, ready to flee. But the nightmare wasn't ready to let him go. As Alex stepped onto the porch, a glint of light caught his eye. He turned his head, his blood running cold. The bathroom door was wide open, revealing the dark room he wanted to escape. Something inside was actively working against him. He saw the reflection of the bleeding man, standing upright, its face pressed against the glass. It raised a bloody hand, beckoning him back. The mirror's influence was extending, manipulating the environment. He thought about smashing the mirror, but Mark's warning echoed in his mind. He felt trapped, the psychological hold of the mirror absolute, urging him back inside. Alex stood on the porch trembling. He knew he couldn't go back inside. He wrenched his car door open and sped away from the cursed place. Once he felt a safe distance away, he pulled over, his body shaking. He took out his phone. He had the video, the police report, a story that needed to be told. He knew exposure was key. He decided he was going to tell everyone. Back in his apartment, he uploaded the video. He cut it down to the most terrifying minute and posted it online. The response was immediate and explosive. Within hours, it had thousands of views, then hundreds of thousands. His video became a viral sensation. It was now a piece of viral terror spreading across the globe, and the whole world was watching. Alex Miller survived his night at the cabin, but survival is not the same as being whole. He escaped the physical confines of the rustic prison, but the psychological chains of the mirror followed him home. The viral fame of his video was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it brought validation. Millions of people saw what he saw. News articles were written, paranormal experts weighed in, and the story became a modern ghost legend. Yet, the exposure also meant he could never truly escape the narrative. He was no longer Alex Miller, graphic designer. He was the Mirror Man, the guy from the viral video. This newfound identity haunted him in ways he never could have anticipated. Every mirror became a source of anxiety, a potential portal for the horror to return. He found himself avoiding reflective surfaces, catching glimpses of himself in shop windows and flinching away. The simple act of washing his hands or brushing his teeth became an exercise in controlled fear, his eyes deliberately averted from the bathroom mirror. He was plagued by nightmares, not just of the bleeding man, but of the glitching face of the other victim. He was forever changed, living with a persistent low-grade paranoia that the reflection was not a warning but a promise. The world saw a spooky story, but for Alex it was a deeply personal trauma. He was contacted by David Chen, the journalist who had stayed at the cabin before him, and they bonded over their shared experience. They compared notes, their stories aligning with terrifying precision. David confessed that he too lived in constant fear. Their conversation brought a strange comfort, but it also cemented the grim reality. The mirror left a permanent scar on everyone it touched. Alex tried to move on, to reclaim his life from the shadow of the cabin. He threw himself into his work, sought therapy, and attempted to put the event behind him. But the mirror's prophecy lingered. A few years later, a minor accident left him with a faint scar on his forehead, eerily close to where the first cut had appeared on the reflection. It was likely a coincidence, a trick of a traumatized mind looking for patterns. But for Alex, it was a terrifying affirmation. He was living on a path he had already seen, walking slowly but surely towards the destiny shown to him by the bleeding man in the glass. He had survived, but he was no longer sure he would ever truly be free. After the video went viral, the Airbnb owner, Mark, faced immense pressure. The cabin became infamous, attracting thrill seekers. Overwhelmed, Mark decided to remove the mirror. Contractors extracted the unusually heavy mirror. It was crated and loaded onto a truck destined for storage, but the truck never reached its destination. It vanished with the driver. No trace was ever found. The disappearance added a terrifying chapter, suggesting the mirror's influence couldn't be contained. The case remains unresolved. It has become a cautionary tale about the reflections we see. What future would it show you? Could you escape